Persuading people to take the actions we want can be hard. Our teams and clients are bombarded with thousands of messages every single day. But there is a way for you to get above the noise. Stories. This is the Stories with Traction podcast, and I'm your host, Matt Zaun. Join my guests and me as we unpack the power of storytelling. We'll talk about topics like leadership, sales, and marketing, all through the lens of strategic storytelling. Enjoy this episode. You're about to listen to a storytelling FAQ sprint episode with Michelle Griffin. For those of you who might not be familiar with Michelle, she coaches on authority-focused personal branding to help professionals step out and be seen as leaders in their space. Since this is an FAQ sprint, Michelle will be answering a question on branding, and I'll be answering a question on storytelling. Let's dive in. Michelle, what is personal branding versus business branding?
That may be probably my number one question, especially when you get on LinkedIn. People for years have been building business brands. So personal branding is kind of a relatively new term. About 7 years ago it was introduced. So now that you hear personal branding all the time, people get confused and don't exactly know. So here's the difference. And I would like to say you need both. So personal branding is the human sharing your beliefs, your thoughts, and getting those out in the world in the form of putting it in like LinkedIn and content. Personal branding. And some people it could be visual, it could be video, it could be long form content, but it's sharing your beliefs, your views that impact someone. Again, everything I do, Matt, is personal branding for a reason, for a purpose, and that is to solve problems. As in business, we solve problems. But business branding is sharing the business's services, their products as the forefront, as the connection point to their intended audiences. So personal branding married with business branding, well, that's the whole point of the LinkedIn branding book I wrote 1.5 years ago is how do you merge the personal and business brand, specifically on LinkedIn in that book. But there is such a way now, and you see that in the terms of even the concept of founder branding, where the founder, the CEO branding, leadership branding, these are all ways that the individual is taking and marrying what they do and being strategic with the core values and intent of the business brand to tell the stories, to communicate the message, and really start honing in on the person to person human relation, but still bringing it back for the business brand. So there's a way, and I advocate both. It's the power of two I talk about in the book, having a personal brand in the context, founder brand, leader brand, whatever that might be for your individual context, and bringing it to the forefront of your business brand. And it's going to be a double win. And it is also a wonderful way to accelerate your marketing, right? Without having to spend ad dollars, without all these other expensive things. Personal branding, say like in the context of LinkedIn, where you and I hang out all the time, it is the place to do that. So you are sharing your personal stories and all that and who you are. And when you have that business brand, you marry the two, and it's a double win for everybody.
So just to get some clarity on this, let me give you a real life example and we'll kind of tackle the personal branding piece. So I was recently working with a client doing strategic storytelling for this individual, building out stories. And I simply asked him, what are 3 things that you want to be known for? And immediately, without skipping a beat, he said leadership, scaling, and innovation.
Mm-hmm.
So based on those 3 points, there's a ton of personal stories with business themes intertwined that he can share to really humanize him, to share, maybe elements of him being involved in sports and maybe different challenges he's experienced would speak to that leadership piece. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and I think I would even challenge him to go deeper because those are some really important contexts. How is there a way that we can position him marrying all the things that he's about? And is he a CEO, a founder, or a leader in this particular company, Matt?
Yes,
Okay.
president and CEO.
Okay. So I always say, if you're going to develop your founder leader brand, let's really find the core things about you too. And then let's match that with the business branding and find the commonality. So when I'm known top of mind, I know about my personal brand and it's so cohesive with the business brand. So I think that's a great first step. And I think everyone, and this is why I love talking about foundational branding, is getting the core really deep dive specificity to your personal brand, right? Because we can all go deeper sometimes. And when you do that work, it all surfaces out. But at the end of the day, we're going to tie it to a business, personal and professional and business goals for sure.
Perfect. Well, thanks for sharing that. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Okay, so Matt, I have a question for you. Stories are everywhere, but at the end of the day, can you tell too many stories? Are there people out there that all you hear them telling stories and then you have to wonder, is there anything there? Is there a point where there are too many stories to be told?
So one of the goals of life is to continue to live, right? So as we continue to live, there's going to be more stories that come in. And I think there's a really good rule of thumb dependent on the situation. So let's talk about the good rule for different categories. So when it comes to onboarding, so companies that are putting on onboarding meetings for new employees, they're going to be sharing the same stories in those sessions because there's new employees. Okay. So if they are tackling their core values through story. So they're sharing company core stories that tie into those values. They're sharing them again and again. Those are new people. Another element is the sales process, right? So for sales reps that are listening, that take people through a similar sales process, so they know how long it takes someone to go from prospect to client. Let's say it's 6 months. There's going to be certain stories that are going to be shared during that process. A lot of them might be the same. Right. So if you have a really powerful story on how you helped such and such client, you might be sharing that again and again and again because they're different prospects. They're not going to get bored of the same story. It's the first time that they've heard it. When it comes to our team, we have to be very mindful of the stories we're sharing. So for individuals listening to this episode that they conduct regular staff meetings, they don't want to share the same story ad nauseum again and again. Their people are going to get bored. They're going to roll their eyes. It's not going to have any staying power. So it's really important to be really intentional when it comes to our documentation of a story. So I recommend people really figure out the medium that they're going to put notes in, whatever that medium is, whether it's an application or whatever works for them. And then as a story comes into their orbit, they're documenting that story so they could share it the next week at their staff meeting. They're paying attention to the stories that they're sharing. So that's kind of like a rotating storytelling piece. When it comes to marketing, it really depends on the different marketing efforts that an organization's putting in. When it comes to me personally, now this is what I do. I'm not challenging people to do the same thing. They need to do what works for them. I have it on an annual rotating basis. So I'll share the same story once a year. Now, some people do it every 6 months, maybe every 9 months. I just do every year because I have at least one different story every day ready to go, and then some. Sometimes I'll do 2 stories a day on social media. So it really depends on what they're trying to do marketing wise. So as far as are there too many stories? Not necessarily, because if you're using them in different ways, there's not too many stories. It's how are we being intentional? How are we being strategic with it for sure?
So context is everything. You're so right. We all have heard the person tell the same story personally or professionally, and you do say, "Wow, heard that before." And you just tune out. But with marketing, you can have theme stories like we're gonna in your story bank, which you're famous for, because anytime I hear the word story bank, I think of you. So make those deposits. So you have your checking account deposits, your savings account, your money market, all those things in the context of marketing would be your customer stories or case study stories, the behind the scenes stories, the product stories. So I love that you've given us the categories and the pillars, if you will, Matt. It's brilliant. Thank you.
And every business is going to have their own story bank for different departments. Every
Mhm.
process that you have in business, storytelling can touch, even when it comes to hiring. You might have specific hiring stories. So from a interview perspective, so I challenge people listening, if you have hiring managers and they're in the process of interviewing, at the end of every interview, the person interviewing asks the job candidate, "Do you have any questions for us?" depending on those questions, there should be a story that's shared. You're going to get the same questions again and again. Is there flexibility? Is there room for growth? Like some of these common questions, they shouldn't be yes or no responses. There should be a story attached to them so it paints the picture on what your organization is, right? So that's just another example of every different aspect of business storytelling can touch. It's really up to us to document it and really come up with a systematic approach to sharing them.
I love that. Thank you, Matt. That was really brilliant.
You just listened to the latest FAQ Sprint episode with Michelle Griffin. If you have a question for Michelle or me, please email me at matt@mattzaun.com with the subject line FAQ episode.